We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Welcome back to the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News channel. I'm Ruben Abati. Now, in the week that just ended, we had the 72nd session of the United Nations General Assembly. It's an annual ritual. But this year's meeting of world leaders is interesting for a number of reasons. If not for nothing else, the exchange among some of the world leaders and the opportunities that it also provided to focus on key issues engaging the world today. And then also our president was there, and which, you know, we once said on this program, it's an important thing to, you know, make Nigeria's presence felt. And the president of Nigeria also delivered a speech which attracted a lot of reactions at home, in the same manner, of course, in which the rest of the international community was concerned about statements made by the president, the North Korean representative to the United Nations, the statement made by President Mugabe, and of course the provocative statements, very comparative statements made by President Donald Trump, who seems to have a talent in that direction. But Prof, you are the diplomacy and international relations expert. How will you assess the just ended United Nations General Assembly in terms of the outcomes?
Well, I would simply say that it is more or less a change in continuity. Continuity in the sense that, and you have rightly pointed it out yourself, that, look, it's annual ritual. So the continuity is that, well, on an annual basis, the UN General Assembly will meet second Tuesday of September for the whole year. So it's annual ritual. There's no big deal about that. No big deal because at the end of the day, you know, we distinguish between two types of debate. The first type of debate is arguing for and against. The second type of debate is the United Nations type, in which every leader, every country will make a statement expressing its view of international questions and so on and so forth. Their concerns, what they want the international community to do, their foreign policy positions. In this case, we talk about change at that level in terms of tactical approaches and in terms of newness of issues, topics there is. So in terms of outcome, assessment, evaluation, I think this year's UNGA that has just started is a platform for raising new critical questions that are likely to destabilize the international community in the foreseeable future. And the many examples you have given are manifestations of the dangers ahead. Most of the statements that have been made, generally speaking, they are made against the background of self-deceit. Nobody is talking about the truth. So people present their own views of the world, their positions of the world, and all purporting to be seeking international peace and security. Most unfortunately, I think the speeches are truly not addressing, you know, the threats to global peace and security.
Well, I mean, President Buhari, let us start from home. For example, spoke about the threat that terrorism poses and international cooperation to combat that. That's a major issue for the world. He talked about the nuclear threat posed particularly by North Korea. That, of course, you know, will be something that is worthy.
Yes, you are right. But
Yes.
you see, that is one side of the story. Now, for instance, talking about terrorism is good, but who is not aware of the fact that many states do sponsor terrorism? And whereas the countries that have done agreements, that signed agreement, that ratified agreement, they are also sponsoring terrorism. Please do not forget that in 1963, when the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was done, did China sign it? Did France sign it? But when these two countries went back and succeeded in perfecting their atomic weapons, they now came back freely to say, yes, we can now sign. All right? The second point there is that those who are against nuclearization, all right, they have refused to destroy their own nuclear arms. They are only trying to prevent, others from accessing it.
Do you agree with this
So
point?
this is the self-deceit we are talking
about double standards.
Yes.
About some countries like the United States, as assuming and projecting themselves as being mightier than other nations, even if, of course,
Yeah, I mean,
geopolitics has its own logic.
It has its own logic, but he's quite right about that, in the sense that you have your weapons, but you're trying to prevent other countries. Because there's a sense that America believes that they are responsible custodians of such weapons, whereas a China or a North Korea or other such countries are, in a sense, as Trump called him, a madman, loose cannon, who can just decide on a whim. So they're not bound by any sort of ethics of diplomacy or global whatever words you use for it. So I think there's a bit of that in saying that we've gone through this, we understand, we have the power, but we would not use the power irresponsibly. So yeah, I mean, it's very much debatable, and I don't think we have.
But you are quite right. You know what the North Korean leader said?
Yeah.
That if North Korea had not made efforts to acquire, their nuclear capacity and capability in place, that the U.S. and its allies would have meted out to them what they did to Syria. See, so for in the eyes
and
of
what they probably also did to North Korea in 1953.
So they're protecting themselves.
Yes, so
but it's interesting though, and I guess sort of piggyback on that point. So America is presenting itself as someone who would use its powers responsibly. However, in President Trump's statement, the fact that he basically said, if the president misbehaves, I will destroy North Korea. So you're taking the actions of one man to now give you license to, in a sense, destroy an entire country.
Well, it's not about one man.
Yeah, but put it in loosely. Who, at what point do you then draw the line on who pays the price for what? I mean, an average North Korean doesn't really particularly care to die.
No, but you see, Yemi, I think the Americans have simply refused to learn from its own history.
Okay.
Remember the history, the story of the little man and the fat man. That is Hiroshima and Nagasaki. By the time the Japanese launched attacks on Pearl Harbor, in the belief that it would take at least 6 months for the Americans to reconstitute their vessels and come into the war, the Japanese simply forgot that the Americans had developed atomic weapons. Nobody knew. So in this case, when the Japanese attacked the Americans in an unprovoked situation, Americans are yet to enter into the war on the side of the Allies. Now, they responded by giving them the little man, Augustus, and the fat man, 48 hours thereafter.
Follow up.
Yeah, now they surrendered. So now the Americans should not underestimate North Korea as it is. You never can tell.
Coming from his own experience.
In fact, the North Korean Foreign Affairs Minister, Ri, he was saying that America is on a suicide mission.
Precisely.
And that the way President Trump talks is making an attack of mainland America almost inevitable.
You're right.
I don't think the North Korean leader is bluffing. I think he means business.
Well,
Even if he was bluffing, at least he's shown
it's
that
not just North Korea. Iran also. at
because
this year's UNGA.
Iran too just tested its own
described Trump as being absurd, you know.
it is not because...
And that it's a master of hate speech.
Which I will have to agree with.
What does this portend actually for the rest of the world?
You see, it is not because China will have been towing the line of the United Nations Security Council in terms of taking sanctionary measures against North Korea. China, Russia, and many others are much likely to give active support to North Korea. In the event there is problem, because the security of China is necessarily tied to regional security there. So China is more interested in regional security, not about
when the chips are down,
precisely.
they will go the other way.
Well, there's been one reaction. You know, I said earlier that President Buhari's statement on North Korea, you know, generated some interest. Although Nigeria has to play its role within the international community. And when Nigeria goes to the UN General Assembly, it takes certain positions that makes it look as if there is an African consensus, you know, if not a West African consensus. But many Nigerians have said, what is Nigeria's concern with what is happening in North Korea when we have our own issues at home here? Instead of talking about IPOB and talking about other things that affected us directly. You know, I dismiss that as many Nigerians having, you know, an insular attitude towards international politics. But what's your reaction to this? In fact, some people even said the president should not even have gone there in the first place. What is our business with North Korea and other issues across the world?
I think for me, some people did say that, and I agree with your I agree with your position on that. That as a sovereign state, the largest black nation, Nigeria's historical relevance and current relevance, Nigeria has a place in a gathering of other nations, as you rightly said, a yearly ritual. I think what I do agree with, though, is the fact that in sort of talking about world issues and how the world responds to issues of security, Myanmar, and all of those issues, people are saying that, but in your backyard, you seem to have a slightly different view of how other people within Nigeria are being treated. And I think that's the one I would agree with. But we definitely have to participate on UNGA as we do every year.
You see, I don't share the position of Nigeria on these issues. It's most unfortunate. Apart from the fact that our foreign policy doesn't have any focus, not well articulated. The major problem is that people...
No, but Prof, you know, there are certain givens about Nigeria's foreign policy.
Yes.
I mean, I know you are the experts.
But
yes. There are certain givens, and the speech just reflected those traditional concerns. I was concerned that people in foreign affairs, they just do a copy of the same thing we go to say every year.
That's why I'm
so if you say there is a lack of creativity, I agree with that.
No, you see,
even the language
on this issue of nuclearization, please, the method for preparing, for making nuclear bombs is exactly the same way you prepare nuclear for peaceful purposes. It's the same method. All right. If you can acquire the technology, the know-how of how to make bombs, whether you now want to use it for war purposes or for peaceful purposes, wouldn't matter. I am against the position of Nigeria of denying herself the opportunity to acquire the technological know-how. That is my problem. You see, we should learn from North Korea, and that's where I agree with you that at the end of the day, Nigerians should be kept abreast about developments in other countries. We should know the politics surrounding North Korea. North Korea now, okay, look at the speech of Donald Trump. Please, one major feature of his speech is the contradiction. All right? He says that he wants a very strong, independent, and sovereign nation. And he encouraged other world leaders in the assembly to do the same, to follow the same. Now, if Donald Trump has become an apostle, all right, of a strong, an independent, a sovereign nation, and he's asking all others to follow the same. Yes, North Korea has done precisely that, because the North Korean leader is now underscoring the national interest of his country. That's their own priority. So you cannot deny North Korea of having access to what it wants to have to. You see, this is the double standard. But we know quite well that there is the need to put this policies of nuclearization and non-nuclearization in context.
We started with Nigeria, and then we went, we went on to talk about international issues. I think before we round off, I would like us to return to one of the issues you mentioned earlier in the highlights of the week, which is this issue about the police saying that newly recruited officers will serve in their states of origin. You made the point that this looks like an attempt to decentralize the police, but some people will say it looks like community policing. But some other people will say, look, what you actually need in Nigeria to solve this problem of vigilantism and some of the local security matters is to actually have state police. It comes up again and again, but you will need legislation to see that through. Now, with threats to national security coming from all kinds of groups, should we be telling the police, the Nigeria police, that look, sending officers to their states of origin is not enough? You really need to overhaul the entire architecture of policing in Nigeria.
True, but it's not a bad way to start, if you ask me. It's not a bad way to start. And I recall the vice president, when he was still acting, had asked the IG to actually do what they call the community policing, to encourage it and all that. Probably this is the fallout of that order by Professor Oshibajo. And I think that when you post people to their respective states, they understand the terrain, they know everybody, they know which criminal is here and all that. That way we can start cleaning up the system security-wise. Yes, I agree with you, because we ultimately would have to get there, but it's not a bad, yes, it's a process.
But isn't this also an issue about trust, about national unity?
We have
about the fact that Nigerians don't trust each other. People have been complaining, for example, of people of the police force sending policemen from the north to the east, and people in the east don't trust policemen from the north because they will assume that they will not defend their best interests. Ordinarily, if this was a united country, should it really matter where any policeman comes from or where he serves?
But also, for me, there are also issues of cultural nuances and language. There's some things, so if your lingua franca is English, so technically a police officer who's from Kaduna, first language maybe Hausa or English, or whatever is worth, is posted to Akwa Ibom. There's some things about Akwa Ibom in the state that he would not be natural to him. So that if he's mediating in an issue, something gets reported to him, if you're from there, there's probably a different way you would respond. So yes, there are trust issues. Yes, we're advocating state policing. But if you start with a national, a federal police force, and you now start, as you said, slowly disintegrating that. So if you're from Akwa Ibom, let's start with that. You are still reporting to a federal body, but we begin to see that, okay, is there a difference? Because part of what those arguing for state policing, beyond this issue of federalism and that structural issue, there's that also cultural nuance.
Okay, if you say every policeman should stay in his own community or village, will you do the same for civil defense? Will you do the same for the military? Will you do the same for the
military? Is slightly different because military is not every day. You don't need. I don't need to see the military.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I don't need to see the military every. The military should come in when there are issues of national. Then it overrides all of that.
National security is present. Yeah.
I think the way Ruben put it earlier on is what I will go along with. Even though I share the sentiments Wale gave, but the fundamental issue is this. When people talk about state police, community police, I want to remind you of what Prince Nduka Obagbena himself said, probably 1997 or 1998. He was a major advocate of community policing, state policing. The argument brought forward by that time, which I think Prince Tony Mahama also agreed with, is that when you have community policemen, they know the nooks and crannies, they know the people. At the end of the day, it will be easier to trace any hoodlums, any criminal. But if you bring somebody from outside of the community, in settling down, in coping with the language all along, it will take time. By the time he will have succeeded in familiarizing himself, yes, they will post him. That one, they said, no, it's not good enough. People who are used to the terrain, to the area, post them there. The second point is that, from my understanding of the point of Reuben, rather than simply post people to their state of origin, let there be legislation. Let there be stricto sensu state police, community police. Then we know.
We're working towards it. It's a process.
It's a process.
Yes, as a starting point, where it can be acceptable, but the way we play politics in Nigeria, this recommendation was put in the 2014 National Conference report.
There are many
There are many
recommendations in that report.
State policing has been proposed a long time ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Back and forth.
But people will argue that the governors, the state governors, will use it to oppress people.
They use
These
a lot
are
of
the
things to oppress
precisely. So now that we are faced with the situational reality, faced with increasing threats, all right, to national security, I think the ideal thing is not to start on a gradual basis. Let there be state police. Let there be community police. Yes.
That will take a long time.
I think that perhaps rather than these piecemeal, hard-hot, episodic attempts to address the Nigerian national question, because this is part of the Nigerian national question, there should be a more systematic, systematized attempt to deal with those issues. And the national conference that we had the other time provided an opportunity. Constitutional amendments by the National Assembly will also probably provide an opportunity. But there must be a political will to recognize the fact that, the basis for the union has to be,
if we had
some
to
people
follow
use the
that
word,
route,
some people use the
it might
word
be long in coming.
restructuring, some people use the word, but we shouldn't go into the nomenclature.
It might be long in coming if you have to follow that route.
Well, it doesn't take forever for countries to reorganize themselves.
Let's start. This is a start. As Wale rightly said, at least they've started something. So let's see how
we have to call it off here. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Reuben Abati in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos. From all of us here on Arise News, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.